Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Just Another Autism Podcast. Today, I am joined by Bryan Russell. Bryan is the Emergency Management Coordinator with Disability Rights Florida. There, he works to ensure that the needs of people with disabilities, including autism, are included in emergency situations. Today, Bryan is going to tell us what we can do to prepare in case of disasters. So thank you for joining us, Bryan.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it, Eileen. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm grateful.
Of course. Can you tell us a little bit more about you, your connection to autism, your life, everything you want our listeners to know?
Sure, absolutely. So, yeah, like you said, my name is Bryan Russell. I'm the Emergency Management Coordinator with Disability Rights Florida. In this role, mainly, we're striving just to make sure that that the emergency preparedness, response, recovery efforts want to make sure that they're all inclusive, that they're all inclusive for people with disabilities, people of all disabilities, and yeah, and so that's kind of just the gist of my role here. We cover every county of the state from Pensacola to Key West, and it's a big state, so very diverse. Like I said, we cover every disability. But I've been here since 2001. Before that, I was the disability access coordinator with the Florida Department of Health. Um, Kind of the same thing, but more directly emergency management related, with a lot of public health issues in there as well. During that time, I was there through the first year and a half of COVID, and that was a challenge. That was a definite challenge.
What what made you want to get involved into this field? It's pretty specific. I didn't even know that was a thing until I met you.
So interesting connection. So kind of like my connection to autism. I'll start there. My connection to autism kind of started when I was growing up in West Alabama. My parents were high school teachers. My dad taught choral music. My mother taught special education. Um, so one of our dear friends, names are Suzanne and Rick. They have a son named Sam who was diagnosed with autism at a very early age, like 4, 5, 6 years oldish. But they're a great family and they're amazing advocates in Alabama for autism and autism services and diagnosis and insurance and everything like that. And Sam's currently living independently, doing great. Um, but when he was a child, one of the things he loved was country music. And I'm sure he still loves country music today, but growing up, one of his favorite artists was a lady named Lori Morgan. And back in the 80s and 90s, she was real popular. And so Lori's music would always kind of help him regulate and calm him down. And so one day, my dad, being a choral music director and a choral music teacher, used some of his connections to get some autographed swag from Lori, and gave it to Sam. And so that was huge for him. So yeah, so that's a kind of quick little story. Um, but what got me into kind of public health and emergency management? Uh, back, I was working at a county health department in the Florida Panhandle. Um, and I was running a youth program. Um, and one day I walked in my office, and my boss called my director called me in and introduced me to their to our emergency manager for the county health department. And the conversation went, "Hey, Bryan, this is Sean. Sean, this is Bryan. He's our EM coordinator or EM director." Um, and she said, "I want you to work with Sean on a quick project." On a quick project. Okay. And I was like, all right, sure. And he asked me my background. My background was public relations, media relations. And he said, good. He said, there is going to be a press conference in about 30 minutes. and I want you to read this statement. It's some virus called H1N1. They call it swine flu, but we don't really know what it is. So good luck.
Gosh, what
Yeah.
happened?
And at that point, I was running the response in Bay County with him, and that got me started in emergency management.
How did you do with that, being launched into it with like solid information?
Well, fortunately, I knew the local reporters, um, so we were able to kind of get the information out as effectively as possible. But yeah, we were able to run a really good vaccine and yeah, vaccine campaign. We worked really closely with the school district and vaccinated every child in Bay County, um, and their families. And and we ran the response very well, actually. Um, but it was, I mean, to say it was insane is an understatement.
Oh, I believe you.
Hmm.
So I guess it's great that you mentioned that because in my head, when you talk about emergency situations, I was thinking natural disasters, but it,
Yeah.
it includes all sorts of emergencies.
Hmm. Oh yeah. And one of the things that with you know within emergency management, one of the things that we focus on is process more so than whatever the type of disaster it is. If we focus on process, because a lot of the processes are going to remain the same, whether it's a hurricane, an earthquake, a wildfire, a pandemic, a zombie apocalypse, whatever. Um, a lot of it's going to be, messaging, um, declaring the disaster, what's the preparedness, how much preparedness can we do, what's going to be the response, what's going to be the recovery time, what's going to be needed for all of those. Um, and so a lot of it's kind of like I said, a lot of the process is the same, just the messaging is going to be different. Um, yeah.
So what do you think are the biggest challenges when it comes to making sure emergency resources are accessible for people with disabilities, especially autism in this
Right.
context?
That's a great question. I think first it's messaging. Messaging is one of the biggest challenges. And just from the nature of emergencies and disasters, but especially with hurricanes and wildfires, as we're seeing in out on the West Coast. Messaging, the information comes in fast and from multiple channels. So you have not competing messages, but you have multiple channels are delivering information to you. So you're getting information from different sources. It's constantly changing, and sometimes, in some cases, it's different. It's not consistent. You're getting messaging from one area that's saying, these are the evacuation routes, but you might get messaging from another source that says, no, 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 you have to go this direction. You know, um, with hurricanes, it's here is the cone of indecision, um, the cone of uncertainty, and so you get forecasts, and every day the forecasts change. And the last few years, I don't know if this is climate change related or if it's just the luck of the draw, but the last few years, the forecasting has always changed at the last minute. And when you're messaging to anybody, but especially people with disabilities and people on the autism spectrum and people with other intellectual or developmental disabilities, it's really hard to keep that message consistent. And you want to make sure that you message it correctly but timely, and you want to keep that message simple. Um, Using plain language, using images, infographics, we found works best. I think, secondly, one of the biggest challenges is that communities plan for people with disabilities. They plan for the autism community. They don't plan with the community. We get that a lot. We hear that a lot from clients that feel completely left out of, why didn't they tell us that the shelter was not going to have what we needed? You know, we've got, family with 3 kids, 2 of them are on the spectrum. We had to evacuate. We took what we could, but they have nothing for us.
It's hard.
Why didn't they plan with us? If they would have asked us, we could have said, we need this and this kind of a thing. So, another issue we've seen as a challenge is education, especially after a disaster, is with a student, and especially within the autism community, is education after disaster. A lot of schools that have been damaged will automatically go to virtual learning. They'll automatically say, "Hey, kids, our school's been hit. We're just going to go virtual school until we get the school repaired." Well, that's great unless it denies access for your kid, for your child to have a free and fair education. That's great unless it violates your child's individualized education or IEP plan. So that's another challenge that we see during and after every disaster. Housing is another issue.
Of course.
Uh, and there's no great one size fits all fix, especially in Florida. What we're really gonna see impacted in California with the wildfires. But after every disaster is housing, affordable housing, accessible housing. Um, how that's going to look is always changing, and that's always going to be a challenge.
So, are there any things that families and caregivers of people with autism can do to prepare, like before a disaster?
Oh yeah, absolutely, and that's the good news. Um, some of the things that we like to discuss with our clients, with our partners in the community, are couple of things would be, talk with your family about what they would like to take if they need to evacuate. Had this conversation the other day with my son of, granted, we don't really have wildfires where we live in Florida, but if we did, or if there was another need to evacuate quickly, what would you grab? So identify, go ahead and start planning. What do we need to do to evacuate? Um, reach out to family and friends that are just out of town and let them know you're going to come to their house during a disaster. Um, that and I apologize if some of this is kind of Florida or tropics focused, but that's kind of what we know. So like during hurricanes, um, if you decide you don't want to go to a shelter, um, then go to your friend's house just outside of the impact area, that kind of thing. But a couple of other things would definitely be talk with your school about what happens after disaster. Um, do is there a way to make sure that my child's IEP is honored and is maintained? Um, what are the surrounding districts? It's like does the neighboring school district, will they honor my child's IEP? Kind of a thing.
Well, and correct
Um,
me if I'm wrong, they have to, right? They have
yes,
to honor the IEP even if, the school is different.
they do. Yeah, they're supposed to. They don't always, and that's where we come in to gently remind the school of their legal requirements and obligations. Um, yeah. Also, one thing we tell people too is take photos and videos now of your home inside and out, just as a way to document what it looks like before the disaster. So it's easier to say, all right, look, insurance company, here's what my house looked like before disaster. There's a lot of jokes there about disasters with children and dogs and everything. And then here's what it looks like now. Um, you also want to make digital backups of any of your important documents.
Right.
Something else that we've noticed, and we've worked with some other partners on this too, is purchase door and window alarms to take with you. We've heard different accounts, some tragic accounts of where children, the family would be staying in a hotel um, after a hurricane. They would be staying in a hotel while their house was being repaired or whatever, and their child would get out of the house and go to the swimming pool. Um, and sometimes they would be okay, and sometimes they wouldn't. Um, so that's one thing that some of our partners have actually been doing is buying is giving door alarms and window alarms and that kind of thing.
It's a great tip. A lot of autistic children wander, like run away, whether at home
Right.
or not. And when you don't have the safety of your safe place,
Mm-hmm.
very good tip.
Yeah.
Is there anywhere where we can see like a checklist for parents, to go through these things? Like, what do you recommend for people who want to be prepared?
So I've worked with the University of South Florida's CARD Center or Center for Autism. So University of South Florida has a program called the Center for Autism and Related Disabilities, or USF CARD Center. And I'll send you a link to all this. They have developed some wonderful tips, checklists, tools, things that you can do now. And I will send that to you. But yeah, you can definitely go online and check that out. Um,
It's great.
and they also have a couple of social stories on how to explain, on how to prepare for what happens during and after a hurricane or after a disaster. Things like, how do I talk to my kids about, hey, our house is not going to look the same.
Right.
How do I deal with that? Or we're going to have to stay in a hotel for a few weeks. How do we negotiate that change, kind of a thing?
And do you think there is anything policy-wise that would need to happen to improve disaster response for people with disabilities?
Yeah, yes, definitely. And there are some things, and there's some things that we as an organization are working on. Um it's going to take time, but and it's a challenging lift, but I really think counties need to make shelters more autism friendly.
Yeah,
Uh most shelters here in the state are in schools. So schools are hardened facilities. They're mostly hurricane proof or wind proof. They're all wind rated and built to withstand Cat 4, Cat 5 hurricane force winds. So if you're going to have them in schools, you've got a perfect setup for children with disabilities, for adults with disabilities. Um, you know, have have like two or three classrooms, selected, and say, okay, oh, you have you have a child with autism. Would you want to go to this classroom? That's your classroom. Um, you can control the lights, you can control the sound, you can make it yours as much as you can. That's one way um, that I think would be good. Um, I mean, some counties are really there's two counties here in Florida that are really leaning into that. And they do that. They work with the autism community in their county. They've worked with the disability groups to do that. Is it written in policy? No. Um, but that's something that I think we really need to get our county leaders on board with from a policy standpoint. Um, my dream scenario would be that every county would have at least one multi-purpose facility that's fully accessible. That during blue skies, it could be used as a community center. You could use it for basketball tournaments, comic cons, bingo, you know, bingo tournaments, whatever. But during gray sky, during a disaster, you can easily flip it into a universally designed, uh, fully uh, accessible shelter. You would have sensory areas, sensory rooms. You would have electricity, so you could have people who might need electricity for oxygen or to keep their medications or to charge their tablets, to charge their wheelchairs, whatever. Um, and it would be just the way shelter should be for the overall community.
These are such amazing ideas. I mean, it's starting to make me think about what would I need, what would my children need who are on the spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I feel like we don't talk about it enough. And I'm in Texas, so we are affected by similar things as
You're
Florida.
right.
We don't have shelters, like houses are not built with underground shelters. I don't know
Mm-hmm.
how it is in Florida.
No, we don't either.
You don't? It's just kind of crazy. I mean, I guess it's mostly for tornadoes. So mostly
Right.
Oklahoma, Kansas, but
Mm-hmm.
we get tornado warnings fairly often in Austin. I mean, several times a year, and it says take shelters. I'm like, well, where?
Where? Right.
Actually. So central room in your house, no
Mm-hmm.
windows, put a mattress over your head, type of things.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's interesting because I didn't know that those schools were shelters usually in
Mm-hmm.
those states. And yeah, it seems like the perfect environment to make accommodations for autistic people. And
Right.
it's not happening quite yet. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah.
What can we do? Like, let's say I want to start getting involved to make that happen. Do you know what I could do on my own to help
Um,
these policies?
Reach out to your county emergency manager, or your county's just emergency management office, and let them know, hey, this is what we'd like to do. This is what we need as a community. Um, Reach out to your local Center for Independent Living. They're one of our big partners here in the state, as well. There was a group in Northern California that it was just a handful of families that all had children with autism, and they got together and decided, hey, we want to go to the same shelter, so we can all figure out the so we can all kind of just deal with this all together. But they all decided, if they have to evacuate, they're all going to go to one shelter, and they reached out to that shelter and said, hey, we're all coming to your place. Here's what we need. Here's what we need in this shelter, so the disaster doesn't suck as bad, basically. uh and they did. And that's kind of what I think probably needs to happen everywhere, really, is emergency management needs to plan with these communities, not for the communities. um is better training for local emergency management on, this is what autism is, this is what this is how we can make it better. um these are um some small steps, some inexpensive, some reasonable accommodations to make in the shelters. And they're very reasonable. It's just let them have a classroom, provide sensory kits. um in I want to say in one county during Hurricane Ian, one of the shelter provided a couple of different tents, just small little pop up tents that they just happen to have on hand. Um, but it needs to be written in policy.
Right. Yeah. Hopefully we get there because it will benefit
Hmm.
a lot of people. One in 36 children has autism right now.
Right,
It's
right.
a lot.
Yeah.
Um, Speaking of autism, which is what we've been doing, I heard you were going to be a speaker at the Autism Speaks Summit in Miami.
Yes, yes. I was asked to be on a panel, and I'm grateful for that opportunity. I think it's great. I'm really looking forward to it.
Are you gonna speak about this topic, how to prepare and
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Definitely offer preparedness tips, how to prepare. um, some best practices that we've seen uh, across the state and stuff. Yeah.
Have you done anything with Autism Speaks before?
As a matter of fact, I have. Over the last couple of years, we've worked with your Florida team on some COVID and flu vaccine events. Kind of worked on some other like public health messaging stuff, and yeah, they're a great group. The Florida team's really good. I like them. They're fun to work with.
I love that you're involved in with so many organizations. Seems like you really want to make change, not even
Yeah,
on
I do.
security.
And I mean, and we're not the only group that can do it. You know, we can't do it alone. So anytime we can work with a university's Center for Autism, a Center for Independent Living, a local emergency manager, heck, even a library group, Autism Speaks, um, whoever we can work with is what we want to do.
That's great. I saw you like football too, which I know nothing about because I'm French and it's just soccer in my life, and F1. So how do you find time to enjoy sports with everything you have going on? And who's your favorite team?
Yeah, so real quick, I grew not this related, but so growing up I played soccer.
Oh,
Uh growing up. And I loved it. It was fun. I mean, we were constantly moving, which is always good when you're a growing boy, and it was great. And growing up, my dad being a choral music teacher, we, I was what, I was very fortunate to grow up spending summers in Europe, and we would wind up spending a few days, at least a few days a month playing soccer with the neighborhood kids.
so nice.
So whether that was in France or Germany or Austria or whatever. So it was fun. But I grew up in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. So it's kind of genetically predisposed to be a fan of the University of Alabama. Um, I've got friends who grew up in Austin, so I do like the Longhorns.
Good.
I do. Uh, and yeah, but and it's probably one of my healthiest coping mechanisms of sports. So you did college football, hockey, soccer, um, and really just have to carve out time during the football season to watch it on Saturdays.
Make time for yourself. I mean, it's important, even if you're busy, to
Mm-hmm.
find
Absolutely.
the time to do something you like. Yeah, we can't function well if we're always going 100. Yeah, I
No, no, not at all. Not at all.
Well, Brian, it's been so amazing to have you on the podcast. I mean, I learned a lot from you, and I
Oh,
know that
great.
listeners will too. And yeah, if you can send me those links so I can put them in the
Yes.
descriptions for people to check out. And yeah, do you have any last word for listeners? Anything you want to add?
Um, yeah, just always just never be afraid to have those conversations now about what to do in case of disaster. Um, it's never too early to start planning, and always pick up an extra pack of batteries, an extra pack of water, and don't hoard all the toilet paper.
Well, yeah. It's funny because every time there's an emergency here in Texas, like the toilet paper shelves are just like cleared.
Oh yeah, yeah. Milk, bread, water,
Yeah.
alcoholic beverages here. Absolutely.
Essentials.
Yes.
Essentials. Have a good one. Bye-bye.
You too. Thanks.